Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday Night Drive Western Suburbs podcast. I'm Josh Welge. I'm here with Joel Boenitz, taping here on Tuesday afternoon. Joel, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. As you can see behind me, we got a Mizzou flag, and they just beat Kansas. So I know it's not high school football related, but it's still pretty elating. But yeah, it was another good week of high school football as well to kick off the season.
Yes, a good win for Missouri this weekend, and a good win for a young man that I used to cover for Friday Night Drive and Suburban Live newspaper, J.J. McCarthy from Nazareth, going into Soldier Field last night, getting a win in his first NFL start. And I tell you, Joel, I felt like it was really surreal watching a kid that I got to cover in high school. I actually did a huge feature on JJ when Friday Night Drive launched, coincidentally, several years ago. And now to see him get the win, sorry, Bears fans, but, good deal for J.J. McCarthy. And I tell you what, I don't know if you saw that game last night, but he needs to get a sponsorship with eye black because he was wearing an enormous amount of eye black last night, as well as scoring some touchdowns.
Yeah, I think he probably realized that he has a little bit more money now that, of course, he has that paycheck of first round draft picks. So, I mean, hey, if he gets a sponsorship out of it, I mean, can't blame the guy.
Not. So, again, congrats to JJ. And, hopefully the Bears can get back on track this week playing the Lions. But anyway, we're here to talk about high school football. And, Joel, I know week one, it seemed like every game that we covered was sort of down to the wire. Game decided in the last few seconds. Wasn't quite the case in week two, but I will say that week two I felt was sort of like a validation week for several teams that had week one wins. See how they could do backing up in week two, and a number of teams that we cover, they did do that, and they kind of showed, they're going to be pretty good teams to be reckoned with. And I want to kind of touch on a handful of those, and got to start with the game that you were at last Friday. Oswego hosting Geneva. Kind of a matchup that we were looking forward to. A couple teams that were in the same conference many years ago. I think they played about 10 or 12 years ago in a really good game. But anyway, Oswego, they really backed up their week one win with an impressive win over Geneva.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game that I think both of us predicted was going to be much like a lot of the week one contests. It was going to be really close, and I mean, just from the jump, Oswego just had the advantage. I mean, pick six from Mariano Velasco on the first pass of the entire game. And that just set the tone for the entire contest for the Panthers. They were just all over the place offensively, all over the place defensively, and Geneva just could not get any momentum in the game. And it was kind of weird to see, especially considering how close we thought it was going to be. But I mean, it was a really validating win for Oswego, especially after, that week one victory against Naperville Central. So yeah, it's got to be a good thing for the Panthers.
Down. And Oswego team that really didn't really know what they had coming into this year. They graduated so much off of last year's 9-0 regular season team that got the second round of playoffs. But I mean, Mariano Velasco and Teddy Manikis, who I know had a good game. I mean, they were kind of seniors back from last year's team that are, kind of leading the way. They had a lot of talented underclassmen. They were part of some successful freshman and sophomore teams the last 2 years, like Drew Kleinhans, a junior quarterback. But Mariano Velasco is a kid that, I mean, I wrote about him this week for my notebook for Kendall County record. I mean, he's a kid that, when he came to high school, him and his coach, Brian Cooney, were saying, I mean, he was like 5'6", $125 or $130. And Coach Cooney said he's a kid that I always thought if he had a growth spurt, we could really have something. And it's funny, I covered him as a basketball player when he was a sophomore, and it wasn't that big, but he had a huge growth spurt after his sophomore year. And I remember seeing him before week one, and I'm like, man, this kid looks so much bigger than he did a couple years ago. But he's really emerged as a really good two-way player for Oswego, and man, really great start for them. Getting 2-0, beating Naperville Central, beating Geneva, and now that really sets them up for a very successful regular season and potentially going on in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm, for sure, and of course conference play starting for them this week as well. I mean, we don't really know what to expect further down the line, but is there a chance that they go 9-0 for the second year in a row? I mean, based off of those first two performances, I can't really put that off the table for them right now.
Uh,
So
no, I think it's an excellent chance. And if I was, a betting man, I would say that they will go 9-0 during regular season, even though it's only 2 weeks in. But they're off to a great start. Really, last week is a very good week in general for the Southwest Prairie West Division. Oswego East, a team that missed the playoffs the last 2 years, they are now 2-0. Got a nice win at Willowbrook, who's a good West Suburban Gold team. Josiah Watson, their senior running back, ran for career high, I think like 208 yards and a couple of touchdowns. So really nice win for them to go to 2-0. And then the game that I was at, Yorkville, which won their week one game in similar fashion in week two. It was a tie game at halftime, low scoring game. They tend to play a lot of those at Yorkville. They're pretty good defense, but coming through in the second half, Jack Beetham, their senior quarterback, threw a couple of touchdowns in the second half, and their defense was really strong. And Jack Beetham, he's a kid that, I mean, Yorkville does not play the type of offense and type of team that he's going to throw for 400 yards and 6 touchdowns. It's just not the way they play football there. But I mean, he's a kid that he's a second-year starter. He got that experience. He's a lot of poise under pressure, and he's got a really strong arm. I mean, deceptively strong arm that can make the throws down the field. I know he threw a 71-yard touchdown pass on sort of a really deep post, just lasered it right in there. So a really good win for Yorkville to go to 2-0. They're a team that, they were 4-5 last year, missed the playoffs for the first time since 2017. Weren't real happy about that. They weren't real happy about the fact that they were 1-4 at home last year either. And really made a big emphasis of that, of wanting to play well at home. Coincidentally, their first 3 games of the regular season have been at home. They've already won 2 of them, and now they got Minooka coming in this Friday. So a really good start for Yorkville as they try to get back to the playoffs where they've really been for much of the last decade.
yeah, for sure. And of course, you mentioned it. They've got Manuka this week. That one's going to probably be a little bit harder than their first 2 games. But, if they come out 3-0 at home to start the season, I mean, that sets the tone for, the rest of the season, because you only need, 2 wins out of the final 6 games to potentially make it back to the playoffs. So definitely a good start for Yorkville this season.
Yeah, I mentioned a good week too for the SBC West. Minooka had kind of bounced back from their loss to St. Charles North to beat Neuqua Valley in another close game. And then Bolingbrook got back from a week 1 loss to HF. They beat Simeon. So, Plainfield North was the only team in that conference to lose week 2. So a good week 2 for what I think will be a very competitive conference, as it usually is, as we progress through the season. Another team, that you and I know a little bit about, that had a good week 1 win, that's had some success recently. But I was kind of wondering to see how they would do this past week. I'm talking about Burlington Central. They played Cary Grove, who was coming off of that week 1 loss to Prairie Ridge in the game that we all were talking about. And it's funny. I mean, I know last week, we make our picks, and I think, you and Joe Aguilar, Burlington Central was a pick, and I remember looking at our previews thinking, wow, I'm a little bit surprised that they stuck the neck out and took Burlington Central in that game. I mean, you guys were right. I mean, 10-7, and their defense really got it done. I know Coach Yossi really loves his defense, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that. I actually got a text from the Northwest Herald editor, Alex Kentucky, and he was like, did you guys collaborate this? I just want to make sure that everything's right on this. And I'm like, hey, I have this pretty much just as close as we had the Geneva Oswego pick, where it's like, it can go either way, but I'm giving the advantage to the home team. And we're 2 for 2 on that. So that works perfectly. But yeah, no, it was such a good defensive showing for the Rockets there. Obviously, they lost a lot of offensive power from last season to this season. So to see the defense step up in the way that they have, I mean, obviously shutout against Crystal Lake South, and now you hold Cary Grove to 7 points. I mean, it's a big turning point for this Rockets program that, for many years has been, that middle of the pack, maybe first one out of that Fox Valley Conference. And now you're heading 2-0, heading into Jacobs this week. I mean, if they have another good performance on defense, this may be, that program shift that we see from time to time. And they may be on the up for years to come.
Yeah, they're a team that they joined the Fox Valley Conference several years ago as, one of the smaller schools in that league, if not the smallest. And, they were competitive, I thought, early on, but, it was tough for them to stack enough wins to be in playoff contention. But I feel like they've got closer and closer. Obviously, they had a really talented quarterback, Jackson Alcorn, the last couple of years. But, it seems like really defense is their calling card this year. And, man, I mean, I think Prairie Ridge is probably the team to beat in that league, but Burlington Central is putting themselves in the conversation with a couple wins right off the bat.
Yeah, and that matchup between Burlington Central and Prairie Ridge, that's going to be a homecoming matchup at Rocket Hill. So I know Matt Rodewald is really happy to see that coming. So he's like, that's going to be the matchup of the year. So.
There you go. I'm sure he will. Joel, there's one more game I wanted to touch on for week 2 before you take a break and then look at week 3. Again, week 2, kind of a validation game. And this match I want to talk about, I think both the winning team and the losing team might have kind of proved themselves a little bit. I'm talking about Wheaton-Warrenville South playing Lions. Lions got the win 31-28 to improve to 2-0. And nice win for them. But Wheaton-Warrenville South, I mean, they had that really good week 1 win over Glenbard South, a blowout. I think it was like 57-0. Something crazy about like that. But in a sense, I almost feel like they've proved themselves a little bit more by almost beating Lions on the road. It was a game that Lions led throughout, but Wheaton South kept coming back, and they took it to the wire. I think that shows that Wheaton South is going to be a team that maybe is ready to push those top couple of teams in the Duquesne Conference.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be the case. I mean, obviously we talked about it last week. Wheaton-Warrenville South has a lot of returning talent on that team. And, to see all of that talent kind of, come together in a big way, especially against the Lions team that, of course, is coming off a week 1 victory over Joliet Catholic. I mean, I think that's a big indicator of the fact that they can push against, these teams that have consistently made the playoffs, because that's been a problem for the Tigers over the past couple of years, winning against those teams that make it to the playoffs. So I think getting that push and, pushing some of these teams to the wire is going to prove to be very good for them whenever they do face off against those teams like Batavia, St. Charles North, further down the line.
No doubt. I want to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors, and then when we come back, we'll look ahead to week 3.
I'm State Representative Steve Reich. Since 2017, I've led the fight to reform our child welfare system and supported educational choice for every kid in Illinois. I've worked to stop the collapse of our public pensions while standing up for businesses that are being crushed by crippling mandates. And I've never forgotten who pays the bill. The work isn't finished, and as I run for re-election, I'm asking for your support. I'm Steve Reich, and I approve this message.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike. With dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country, we meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
Back on a Friday Night Drive, Western Suburbs podcast. Josh Welge here with Joel Boenitz. And Joel, before we broke, we talked about Wheaton Warrenville South, the Duquesne Conference team, that had a nice week 2 game that, maybe sets them up well to potentially compete with some of the upper teams in the Duquesne Conference. I tell you what, week 2, one of the more eye-opening results I thought was Glenbard North not only beating Bennett, but beating them quite handily, 41-15. Donato Gatsis, their really good running back, had a great game, over 200 yards. I think his brother might have had a couple touchdowns as well. But Glenbard North, they're now 2-0. They're 2-0 for the second consecutive year. Last year, they won their first 2 games, if I'm not mistaken, and then they got into Duquesne Conference, and that did not treat them very well. However, they get Batavia, I believe, this week. They gave Batavia all they wanted in the regular season, I think week 9 last year.
Mm-hmm.
Now they got Batavia. Kind of a sneaky, interesting game this Friday.
I totally agree with you on that. I mean, I think Glenbard North is really itching to get their first Duquesne Conference win in 3 seasons. I mean, you mentioned it last year. Batavia was hoping it was going to be an easy win to get a clinch of at least a share of the Duquesne Conference title, and it came down to a 2-point conversion at the end of the game. But I think this year it's going to be another, sneaky good contest. You mentioned it. Donato Gatsis is coming back. He's averaging over 200 yards rushing in his first 2 games, and they return a lot of seniors or a lot of juniors from last year into this year for their senior year. So I think they have the experience, and I think there's going to be a good chance that they can pull off some upsets and maybe get a couple of Duquesne Conference wins under their belt, and who knows, maybe even sneak into the playoffs. We'll see.
Yeah, I think Glenmar North is going to be one of those Duquesne Conference teams that's going to be scratching and clawing. They are Panthers after all. To get to those 5 wins, Lake Park is going to be one of those teams. I think both the Wheatons. I think Geneva is too. It's going to be a grind for them to get to what they need to do to get back to the playoffs. You're going to be seeing the Vikings again on Friday against St. Charles North. Of course, St. Charles North is 2-0. What are you looking at of that game?
Well, I think it's going to be extremely interesting to see, because I know obviously Geneva is coming off that big loss against Oswego. It's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back after that. Obviously, they have a lot of young people on that team who don't have that varsity experience, and that Oswego game was their first kind of wake up call. It's like, oh, this is kind of different than sophomore team and stuff like that. Meanwhile, St. Charles North obviously is filled with experience, 17 starters returning, and they've been coming out in full force. Last week, they had 200-yard rushers, Carson Durante and Tom Bendel. So that offensive line is just good for them. And, I see this as a game that can either be a really close victory or just an absolute blowout, and it's decided by the first half. So it's going to be interesting to see which way it turns this game.
Yeah, one thing we do know is the Duquesne Conference is going to have at least 1, if not 2 games that come down to the wire, potentially go to overtime every week. That's just the way.
I think maybe 3.
That's the way that conference, that's the way they do their business. So, that's going to be life in the Duquesne Conference. Another league that's a powerhouse league, the West Suburban Silver. One of the best games of week 3, Hinsdale Central going to Downers Grove North. Hinsdale Central has had a couple down years. They've really been victimized by a very difficult schedule. But they're now 2-0. They had that huge win over West Aurora week 1. Not only that they beat them, but just the way they beat them. They back it up by beating Naperville Central last week. Raleigh Contreras, a 4-year varsity quarterback. You don't get too many of those. I know St. Charles North had one, but there's not too many. But he's off to a great start. And now they go to Downers Grove North to start silver play. Downers Grove North is also 2-0. They won handily against Downers Grove South. But interesting in that game is that their really fine quarterback, Owen Lansu, going to Minnesota. He left the game late in the first quarter. Little unclear if it was a matter of, hey, we got a really big lead, like 3 touchdowns. Let's kind of rest them rest it away, or if there's something that's going on with that. injury wise, kind of non-committal afterwards. But I will say that Kevin J. Jr. for them, who's their running back, he came in and ran Wildcat and ran it quite well the rest of the game, and they scored 55 points. But that's going to be something to watch in that game, whether Owen Lansu is available for that game. Either way, though, that's a really good game in the West Suburban Silver. I think we're going to find out a lot more about Hinsdale Central, who's 2-0 after that game.
Yeah, was this a game that you predicted at the beginning of the season being one of the really good games of the West Suburban Silver?
Yeah. And that was before I really didn't know what Hinsdale Central, I felt like on paper, they looked like a really team that should be very good. I mean, they have a 4-year starting quarterback. They have an offensive lineman that's going to Iowa. His younger brother has got a lot of Power 5 looks. They have experience at the skills. It's just that league is so difficult and our conference is so tough. And they've had a few down years. And it's kind of like, can they get those early wins to get some confidence in them and then take it with them into the league? Well, they've done that now. And now we'll see what they do against Downers Grove North, who, I mean, they got 3 kids going to play in the Big Ten. So it kind of speaks for itself. A lot of experience there as well. So that should be a really fun one in the West Suburban Silver. Another matchup, non-conference game. Canelan is 2-0. They got that big win week 1 at Rock Island, a big blowout win. They backed up one of the wilder games last weekend. They beat Lamont. I think it was 42-37. Carter Korbowski had a huge game for them. I think over 200 yards. Now they get DeKalb, who DeKalb darn near beat Sycamore, who is probably one of the class of the Interstate 8 in week 1. So it's going to be a nice little test for Canelan before they go into Interstate 8 conference play playing DeKalb.
Oh, definitely, for sure. And I know, obviously, DeKalb also has, of course, Davon Grant, who's a really talented athlete just overall on that roster. So, it's going to be interesting to see. Of course, Canelan needed, a really big effort from running back Carter Grabowski to get that victory last week. I think he had 215 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. So, they may need another, heroic effort from him in this game, or just somebody else to step up. I think it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, Caitlin obviously went 4-0 last season, and then, barely stuck into the playoffs with going, 1-4 in their final 5 games. If they can do that again, or if they can get, those 4 wins off the bat from the beginning of the season, they're going to be in good position. So I think this game is going to be pretty crucial for them heading into the rest of the season.
No doubt. So maybe maybe one of the glamour matchups for the weekend, I would say, is going to be in LaGrange Park, Mount Carmel, 3-time defending state champion in 7A, playing Nazareth, 3-time defending state champion in 5A. Speaks for itself right there. I mean, just off the bat, I mean, that kind of says a lot. Nazareth 2-0, Mount Carmel 2-0. Nazareth, really nice week 2 win over Morgan Park, who I was impressed with in week 1. I thought that could be a close game in week 2, and it really wasn't. Nazareth kind of won that game going away. Now they test themselves against Mount Carmel. And I tell you what, Joel, my question is anybody going to be able to hang with Mount Carmel for 4 quarters? I mean, St. Pete is really good, and Mount Carmel's like, yeah, you're pretty good. Let's keep you 3 touchdowns away from us. So, I mean, I think Nazareth is really good. I just want to know, can they play down to the wire with Mount Carmel? Because, man, Mount Carmel is just so stacked.
They are. And I was listening to the the podcast last night between Matt Rodewald and Steve Susie, and obviously they know a little bit more about the Catholic League stuff than I do, dare say. But the way that they were describing it, they just have so many weapons all throughout that roster. And the question is, you think you can stop one thing of theirs, and then they'll just hate you with something else completely, with somebody who's extremely talented. And it's so hard to stop them. And it's going to be interesting to see what Nazareth pulls to try to stop them in this game. I mean, I'm really interested to see what happens for that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously 2 completely different teams, but Nazareth last year won state, but when they played Mount Carmel, it was kind of a high-scoring shootout game, but then Mount Carmel just kind of took it to another level. I think it was like a 55-34 game. They won by a few touchdowns. So curious to see if Nazareth can, hang a little bit deeper into the game. And I mean, either way, these teams are going to be teams to watch down the road. They're both off to good starts this season, but certainly a matchup that we'll have an eye on this weekend. Our Russ Hodges that covers the Catholic League for us. You want to check out his notebook this week. A lot of good stuff. He'll be there on Friday night at Nazareth. Game get out. I'm going to be on Friday. Kind of different kind of matchup. Plano playing Sandwich. Rivalry game. The War on 34. They've been playing since 1897. This is going to be the 114th edition of the rivalry. Both teams coming in 0-2, kind of licking their wounds a little bit. But, man, I tell you what, that's going to be one of those games where, I mean, get there early, close down the businesses, shut the doors. Everybody in town going to be there. I'm going to be there. Should be a lot of fun. I know I was at the game last year that Sandwich was able to beat them at Plano. And this year it's going to be at Sandwich. Sandwich coach Jason Van Pelt. He's a first-year head coach, but he played for Sandwich, was an assistant for a long time. Now it's going to be his first year as a head coach. And it's funny, I was talking to him this week, and he's like, these kids know each other. They play against each other. They probably play some basketball leagues maybe against or with each other. And he's like, when they get out of high school, a lot of them kind of become friends. But when they're in high school, not too close. They're I want to call them friendly. So I mean, so that should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that game on Friday at Sandwich.
Yeah, I think it's really funny because, of course, obviously you mentioned it. We talked about this game last year, and me not being from the area, I didn't know how much this is. So I'm like, that's kind of interesting. And then I saw the photos, I saw everything about it. And I'm like, oh, this is a big deal. Okay. And I mean, both of these teams, both of them are 0-2 heading into this game, so they're going to be fighting for their first win of the season with this. So I think it's going to be a pretty big game once again.
Yeah, Sandwich was actually 0-2 going into this game last year, and they ended up making the playoffs. So, I mean, obviously 0-2 is not where anybody wants to be, but the season's not over yet. But if you get to 0-3, ooh, that's a little difficult coming back from 0-3. So,
yeah.
Should be a fun one Friday in Sandwich. Looking forward to it. Plan on getting there quite early for that game so I can get, parking within a mile. So, it should be a lot of fun. Joel, before we get out of here, any other games that you got your eye on?
Kind of throwing it back to the Catholic League, I think, another big game is going to be St. Francis and Loyola.
Yeah.
I think that's another matchup that, we need to talk about. Obviously, last season, St. Francis ruined the first game under the lights at Loyola Academy with a victory. And so I'm sure Loyola is going to be chomping at the bit to, get a victory back on St. Francis's home turf. And on top of that, I mean, they've got a week of rest because they didn't have a game last week. So arrested Loyola versus St. Francis is going to be something that, it's going to be a little interesting to see, I think.
I'd have to talk to the coach. I'm curious if I'm sure they want to play all 9 games, but it's like there's the advantage they get a week off, but then there's a disadvantage that, you're 2 weeks removed from playing. So, I mean, I don't know. We'll see, but that should be a lot of fun. Loyola playing St. Francis. Our Bob Narang is going to be there for Friday Night Drive. So it should be a lot of fun there. A lot of good stuff coming up. Football Friday. A lot of good stuff on Friday Night Drive. I'm going to be back here tomorrow. Talk to Steve Susi as we look at some of the top week 3 games. I'm sure we'll be talking a little bit of playoff projections because we always do. And then you want to check out Eddie Criffio and JT Penalty on Thursday with their South and West podcasts. And then Seuss will be back here on Friday night with Matt Rodevald for our live stream on YouTube. Definitely want to check that out with our game reports, video highlights, a lot of discussion, a lot of good stuff. So that's about it for us, I think. So again, for Joel Boenitz, this is Josh Welge. Everybody have a great Tuesday afternoon and a great week 3.